Something quick that I wanted to mention before we get into the actual review of this. This film actually came out, back in 2020 when I started my first semester in college. Of course, COVID was a thing. And I guess it still is now, but and it's now being re-released in my last semester, and it's everything came full circle, and it felt very fitting that it came out now, given what this film is about. That film being Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan. Like I mentioned before, it is re-releasing back in select IMAX and 70mm theaters this week. I think to pair the 70mm capable theaters for Dune 2, because they had a lot of problems when Oppenheimer came out. A lot of the projectors crashed and all of this stuff. So they want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So might as well re-release something else that also used that format, just to get the projectors and everything warmed up and get people used to how to set it up. All of that stuff. It's I'm gonna try my best to explain the plot of this. It's not gonna go well, and you will probably I can't. I'm not gonna be able to explain this in a way that will make someone who has no idea what this movie is understand even just a fraction of what it's about. But I'm gonna try my best anyway. Also, ignore the bed behind me. I just realized that. Just ignore it. It's okay. I'll fix it later. I didn't even realize it was like that. I just climbed out of bed and filmed this. All right. So the basic plot of this is John David Washington plays quote unquote the protagonist, who is a secret agent who gets recruited by a secret organization and is given one word: Tenet. With this, he is tasked to discover the origins of objects that can seemingly move backwards in time and find out how that relates to an attack coming from the future to the present. Now, that is a very, very poor description of the overall plot of this film. Uh, but I guess the easiest way for me to explain what this film is like is that it pays a lot of homage to spy films and other James Bond movies. There's a lot of futuristic high-tech gadgets. It's this big globe-trotting adventure. We have this villain that's kind of over the top and big. And of course, it goes full, it dives more into the sci-fi elements because of the whole time warping, time bending thing. And one of the things that I really, really love about Nolan, I think he's one of the best big budget blockbuster directors working today. The reason for that is that he trusts his audience. He trusts them so much to follow along with the stories of his films. I always describe his stuff as being high concept with heart. And I think the two best examples of that, right now anyway, are Inception and Interstellar. They both, are dealing with all of these huge science fiction, elements to them, but they do have, an emotional core to them that, even if you can't keep up with the, sci-fi, space travel, dream stuff, you can at least attach yourself to the characters. You can understand what they're feeling, and you can, that's the heart of the film, really. It's not about, all of the sci-fi elements. It's about the characters and their own emotional journeys. That, and also there's usually something thematically interesting in his films that, I can ponder on after the credits roll. This film does not have that. I'm sure there's something thematically interesting in this. I couldn't tell you what that is. Most of the characters in here and the dialogue lack that emotional depth that the characters in Inception and Interstellar have. That's not to say that the performances are bad. John David Washington plays his character, very serious and cold, and you could compare his performances, being James Bond-esque. It definitely does take a lot from that character. Robert Pattinson is in this as well. He plays sort of John David Washington's buddy, sidekick. I don't know who he would necessarily play in the world of, if we were comparing this to a James Bond movie, because James Bond doesn't really have like sidekicks in the same way that this character acts. Not at least not nothing. No one that comes to the top of my head. But he is a lot of fun to watch in this. He's got this look on his face the whole film where you know that he knows more than what he's letting on. So you never really know what his motivations are until like halfway through the film. And I thought the dynamic between John David Washington and Robert Pattinson was a lot of fun to watch. They have a lot of they're really good together. good chemistry between them. But by far the most interesting performance in here is Kenneth Branagh, who plays the film's main villain. This is a role that could easily fall into a goofy, really goofy territory. He changes his voice and puts on this thick Russian accent. I was trying my best not to to do an impression of him, but it does ride that line between being, just goofy, completely goofy, and actually intimidating. And I feel like it's perfectly down the middle. It's perfectly camp, this performance, and it fits perfectly with the rest of the film. That being said, going back to the film's story, I found the film to be incomprehensible, and the film is pretty much impossible to follow on a first time watch. There is so much going on, and there is another thing that is also making it almost impossible for you to keep up with the story. I'll get into what that thing is near the end of this, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I understand the plot. I will, however, sit here and tell you that I loved every second of this as a theatrical experience. Of course, this being a Nolan film, I have to talk about this damn company again. It's another IMAX shot blockbuster, which means expanding aspect ratio and higher quality images for when you see this in an IMAX theater. Please sponsor me by now, because I've mentioned you 4 times in my videos, seemingly back to back to back, kind of. And of course, it being a Nolan film, he knows when to, bring out the big aspect ratio and use these cameras. And those sequences are very, very immersive, visually stunning, jaw-dropping, And there's, a lot of this is used for establishing shots or action sequences. And there's sweeping shots over these, over cities that just kind of pull you into the film and the world. I compared the use of IMAX to the Soarin' over California, or whatever it's called, Soarin'. I think it's just called Soarin' ride now at Disney. And it does have that same effect, especially when you do kind of like a dolly tracking shot over a city. It's mind-blowing. Impressive stuff. But like I said, this format is mainly used for action scenes or, big, loud set pieces. Near the beginning of the film, not near the beginning. It's also not halfway through. At some point in the film, there is a plane crash sequence, of course, shot in this format. And when this sequence started, I let out kind of this sigh, just... And it's not a bad sigh. Don't take that as like, oh, I'm like, oh, this shit again. But it was like, the way that it was handled felt so comforting, because you knew that you were in the hands of someone that knew what they were doing. First, you just have the scale of the plane just taking up the entire screen, and you just really, you understand the weight of what's going on. And of course, the way that he built up the sequence is just perfect. The rising tension, which I felt myself gripping into the armrest of my seat as the sequence is playing out. And on top of that, it's a Nolan film, and he's talked extensively about wanting to use as little CG as possible. So this was all done practically. As far as I know, there might be a little bit of digital cleanup, to make it look more what he has in mind. But for the most part, this is a practical effect. This is a real plane that is crashing into a hangar, an airport hangar, and I don't why, that adds. It's such a. I get why, right? It does make it a lot more impressive visually, but you're also just sitting there like, goddamn, because deep down that this is something that they did for real, and I think that makes it that much more entertaining to watch than if it were just, a visual effect. There's a scene where one character is fighting another, and one is moving forwards and the other one is moving in reverse. Nolan said in an interview that they didn't reverse any of the footage, but they actually had the actors learn the fight both ways. And what happens is it becomes this weird, beautiful dance of a scene where, their movements feel both choreographed and completely spontaneous at the same time. It's incredible. It was really, really just impressive to see unfold on the big screen. Of course, this being in a IMAX auditorium, it is a very, very loud movie, as most Nolan action films are, if you've seen Dunkirk. My ears were ringing afterwards, and it was very, very overwhelming, which worked for and against the film. On the one hand, it helped build tension for sequences like the plane crash. You obviously want that to be loud. You are, there's jet engines and, it's crashing into something. There's explosions. Obviously, you kind of need that to be a little bit louder. And of course, the action scenes and gunshots are very, very loud, but it does help you. It does help pull you into this world. On top of that, you have the beautiful score by Ludwig Göransson, which perfectly matches the whole time bending element of this whole film, and it also kind of helps showcase our characters' emotions when you can't hear the dialogue. And that is my number one problem with this movie as a whole, is that this movie is so reliant on you being able to keep up with the plot that when you have this beautiful score drowning out your dialogue, you are essentially making it impossible for anyone to understand what is going on after a certain point. And it's not like I feel like I missed important pieces of dialogue. I know I missed very important pieces of dialogue because of the soundtrack or the special effects just overtaking it. There's a scene where our characters are out on a boat. There's 3 characters out on a boat. And they're kind of talking, right? This is how the scene plays out, right? I'm gonna show you exactly how the scene unfolds without actually showing you the clip, just so you understand what it was like watching this in the theater. Okay, here it goes. Exactly what I said in this. And it is frustrating because I felt like that scene in particular was one of the most important scenes in the film, and not being able to hear that and get to understand our characters' relationships to one another is frustrating. I want to know that, just dial it back, please. And this is a problem that I did not have with Nolan's next film, Oppenheimer. So I know that somewhere between 2020 and 2023, he learned his lesson and he dialed back on this, which, thank God. Going back into positives, because I do like this film overall, I did find the other action scenes that I did not mention before to be very, very thrilling and exciting. Of course, that is, combining with the sound and the IMAX shots. The action scene that I'm probably the most intrigued by is the last sequence. It is impossible to follow everything that's going on, but it is just such a huge visual spectacle that it's just a joy to watch unfold on screen. You got elements moving forwards, you got things going backwards, you got explosions that will happen, then you'll see them in reverse, you got buildings that will topple over, then they be put back up and then knocked down again. It's just chaos. Absolute visual chaos, and it is so fun to see. It's just Nolan knows how to do this. I don't know, if it was any other director, I would find the film more frustrating than I do now. And I think I give Nolan a lot of credit and a lot more chances than I do other directors, because I know that he has the capability of, pulling off these big action sequences and showing us these huge sci-fi worlds. And he does it, even though if you can't understand it fully, you have something in there that you can attach yourself to and at least find enjoyable. And the same can be said here, even though I, don't emotionally care as much as I do in something like Inception or Interstellar. I can't say that I had a bad time watching this. Not even close. I had a blast. There's a lot of dialogue early in the film as the protagonist is explained the rules of this universe. And he is told, don't try to understand it, feel it. And that is the perfect way to describe why I enjoyed this so much. Let the film take you along for the ride, and I think you'll find it to be, at the very least, enjoyable. But yeah, that is my review of Tenet. If the film is playing anywhere near you in IMAX or 70mm, please go and check it out. I think it's worth a watch, especially if you've never seen it before. Go and see it the way it was intended. But that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.